Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us and the many pathways that lead us to a bigger understanding of ourselves and what we're here for and, the big mystery of life. And today, I'm really excited to have on a guest because I've actually studied with this man, and I should probably introduce myself first. I'm all out of sorts, as you can see. Carrie Hummingbird doesn't normally do it this way. This is awesome. So I'm Carrie Hummingbird. I'm your host, and I actually love the big mystery. I love diving into the conversations about the divine and how we live this thing called life. It's the thing that fascinates me the most, and that's why I have this show, and I bring on this show all kinds of amazing people who I've met and worked with and learned about and had conversations with, and then I bring those conversations to you for your consideration. And so today, I'm really excited to have José Stevens on the show. Welcome, José.
Welcome. Hi. Nice to
So
be here.
José has been a teacher of mine. He's a founder of the PowerPath with his wife, Lena Stevens, and their daughter, Anna. And it's a group that I've worked with for a while now, and I love the teachings, and I'm really excited about having José on the show. So that's why I'm a little rattled right now. So José is an international lecturer, a corporate team builder, and organizational coach, consultant, and trainer, a psychologist, licensed clinical social worker, and author of more than 20 books and numerous articles. He is a board member of the Society for Shamanic Practitioners. He's the founder, with his wife Lena, of the PowerPath School of Shamanism and the Center for Shamanic Education and Exchange, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating youth in indigenous cultures. He has completed a 10-year apprenticeship with a Huichol Maracame in Mexico, and has studied with the Shipipos of the Amazon and the Pacos of the Andes for the last 30 years. And so it's a pretty big deal. This is a path, as you guys know, that I'm on. I study with the Karo Shamans. I've been training with José and Lena and Anna and learning about the Huichol and the Shipipo, and it's just so exciting. This is really powerful medicine. And, I want to just say, this is why I love this path so much, José, because you are a psychologist, so you're trained in the Western psychology, you understand that, and then you also bring in this influence of earth-based spirituality for healing, and this has been my path. So yeah, we're gonna have a great conversation today. And so I want to start it off by just asking you to share with us, what was your early path like? How did you get involved in all of this training with indigenous cultures? What led you to make that choice, to make that decision as a psychologist?
Yeah, it's a great question. It goes all the way back to the beginning of my life, actually. When I was a child, my grandmother lived with us. Now, my mother's was Mexican, and my father was Irish, English, American. And my mother's mother, who was also Mexican, lived with us and was sort of my nanny. And my parents both worked, and so I spent a whole lot of time with her. And she didn't speak any English. She was old. She was in her early 80s at the time. I was a little kid. And she was raised she was raised in Mexico in a rather wealthy household. They had a hacienda in Chihuahua, and in wealthy Mexican families at that time, the kids were often raised by the servants, and their servants happened to be mostly Indians, Native American, for Mexico, like people like Huichols, people like the Tarahumara Indians, and a number of different tribes. And they actually raised her. So she used to entertain me for hours, telling me stories about what they taught her and about their healing practices, and because they were a shamanic peoples. And I would just listen wide-eyed and, absorbing it all. It was wonderful. And, my mother was very strict Catholic. And so she used to say, like, oh, don't listen to your grandmother. She's kind of senile. you know, but I knew different.
Yeah, because I think you felt the magic even then, like of what she was saying, and
I did. And, you know, uh, she just retained this knowledge and she would even practice it herself. And of course, to my mother, that looked kind of crazy. But to me, it looked like what people should do. Okay, so anyway,
yeah.
eventually she passed on, and I went to, conventional schools. I went to Catholic schools, and um, that sort of drifted, into my past. And it wasn't until I was and then I was really interested in being a psychologist. And so I studied social psychology, and I studied psychology, and I eventually went to school in social work, and I got a degree in social work. I was a psychiatric social worker for 10 years and worked in state mental hospitals and all the usual, stuff that goes with that. And learned a lot about mental illness from a Western psychology standpoint. Got psychoanalytical training at the time. That was what was happening. And then 10 years later, I went back to get my doctorate in counseling psychology. And I went to this school called the California Institute of Asian Studies, which became the California Institute of Integral Studies, which is rather well known. And there, I met some really interesting people. And they had anthropologists on staff, and there was this whole interest in shamanism. And it woke up all the memories that I had of my grandmother, and that knowledge, it woke it up in me. And so I had both trainings. I had this shamanic training for my grandmother, and then I had this very conventional psychological training from, my university training. And then I was at a school here where I could actually put them together. So that was great. And I did my doctoral dissertation eventually on the interface between Western psychology and shamanism. And I won't go into that because it's, dissertations are not interesting to talk about. But it was really fascinating for me. And during that time, I met, through happenstance, I met a Huichol who was in the United States doing I was living in the Bay Area at that time, and he was invited by his brother to do some healing work. And so I met him and I actually went to him. He didn't speak any English either, and he barely spoke Spanish. It was mostly Huichol because he was a native person. But I could feel when he worked on me, I could really feel that he was doing something that was influencing and affecting me in a good way. I felt great after, a healing session with him. So then a few days later, he let it be known that he was looking for some students that, he was already a teacher among his own people, but he was looking for some, North American white folks, students that he could begin to train. And I was instantly interested. I went home and talked to my wife, Lena, about it. And she was totally interested. She went to see him. And we had no idea at the time what we were getting in for, what we were in for, right? So we just said, oh yeah, this sounds really great. We'll do it. And man, that began like a 10-year apprenticeship process where there were 3 couples. He wanted to work with couples. And so, we fit that bill. So there were 6 of us, and we all began training with him. And that involved going down to Mexico and working with him there a lot. We would go out to the deserts in central Mexico, and we would do a lot of ceremonial work. And I was used to formal training like I got in school, Western style. And he wasn't that kind of a teacher. He would just he would just do ceremony. And we were sort of learning, but not in a conventional way. I mean, we couldn't even speak the same language hardly. So that was a little frustrating for me, especially because in the first year, he would barely even talk to me. He basically ignored me and just talked to Lena, my wife, because he was, you know, just felt more comfortable with her. And so I was wondering what I was doing.
Yeah, it started getting you triggered, right? Like your
Yeah,
all
it
your
was,
stuff.
it really brought up a whole lot of stuff for me, a lot of challenges, a lot of, you know, my fear patterns and my self deprecation, my self-worth is just like, am I really okay? And all this stuff, all my garbage came up. And so little by little, he began to warm up to me. It took about a year. And then he began to actually start talking to me and including me. And I realized, though, that it was just a big initiation. It was a big test. It was his way of just giving me a hard time to see if I was going to stick with it.
Wow.
And then when he found out I was sticking with it, he was like, okay, you're cool. You pass.
Yeah. Well, that's how it is, right? Because this is one thing I learned from you and Lena is really about initiations and about bids for power. This is a
Yeah.
big part of your teaching.
Yeah. Well, we learned the hard way. And uh, after that, of course, there was 9 more years of training with him, right? And eventually I began to understand how he was teaching us. There was never formal lectures or, things like that. But after spending a few days with him, I would go home and I would realize that I knew a whole lot more than I did before. And I couldn't figure out how that was happening because he wasn't actually like teaching in a conventional way that I could understand.
You
But
weren't taking notes, like you weren't like he wasn't
no,
lecturing and you were like writing down all the notes.
right. It was impossible to write notes. I didn't even know what he was saying or what he meant. But somehow on another level, I understood exactly what he was saying. And I was downloading a lot of knowledge without realizing at first that that was happening. And then eventually I was able to get with the program and be much more proactive in the process of just accompanying him in ceremony. And anyway, long story short, that was my experience with him. He passed away after about 10 years, just short of completing our apprenticeship. And so he knew he was dying, and I knew we knew he was dying, and he had cancer. And so he said, I said, well, what are we going to do? We haven't completed our apprenticeship. We have one more ceremony to do, but it looks like you're dying and you won't be there. And he said, oh, don't worry about that. That's not a problem at all. It's like, yeah, I won't be there physically, but I'll be there every other way. So you just come to the appointed place and the appointed time, way down 1,000 miles down into Mexico, as we usually do, which we've done many times before. And he said, don't worry, I'll be there. And I was like, what? I mean, that was even a little far out for me at the time, and I had been through a lot of stuff. So that's what we did. He passed away, and we kept the appointment, and we went down into the desert and began to conduct the ceremony the way he had taught us. And sure enough, it was cold, it was windy, it was, kind of bitter. And we built a fire, and it was kind of like blowing around, and it was middle of the night. And all of a sudden, he showed up across the fire from me. But it was a really strange thing. It was like he was transparent. I could see right through him, but he was definitely there. And I was like marveling at this. I mean, it just was like mind blowing. And so he said, I told you I would show up, and here I am. And I have some things to tell you. And then he began to tell me all my shortcomings, like all the, like the worst aspects of myself. He said, you're lazy, you're, this and that and the other. And I was like, oh my God, you went on and on, like
Wow.
for like maybe an hour. And I was like really feeling humbled and kind of shocked. And, like I wasn't expecting that. But somehow I didn't mind because I was so happy to see him. It was like, okay, if this is what it takes to see you, okay, I'll put up with this. And then he said, okay, so we're done with that. And then he proceeded to tell me all the things that were really good about me and really strong and really powerful. And that went on for another hour. And I was like, just amazed. And then eventually the night wore on, and it was like 4 a.m, 5 a.m. It was, and he just kind of drifted off and he was no longer there. And so meanwhile, all this time, Lena had been across the fire from me with a blanket over her head. So I couldn't see her at all. She was just buried in this blanket. And so I went over and I kind of moved her a little bit. And I said, are you awake? And she said, oh, yeah. I said, well, you'll never guess what happened. I said, I've been talking to Guadalupe all night long. And she pulled the blanket back and she said, but I've been talking to Guadalupe all night long about entirely different stuff, right? And so I realized then that, he had been talking to both of us. And that was his plan all along. And there was no problem that he was on the other side. It was maybe even better. And so there's more to that story. I'm not going to go into that more, but that's one of many stories I have about Guadalupe, that I could go on and on telling, but you get the idea, hopefully.
I do. And this is one of the things that I find really interesting about the PowerPath, because I've studied with a lot of different teachers, and there's definitely magic doorways everywhere. But the magic doorway, I really found the magic doorway here was a palpable sense of the container and the protection and the guidance from the other side. Like it's palpable. I can feel it. It's visceral. And I can feel like, okay, like even for me, Guadalupe showed up, right? Because I had my I had my journey, and on the 3-day retreat where you have your solo in the woods, and
Yeah.
you told us that Guadalupe might show up, right? Like,
Yeah.
you might get a hummingbird, and I sure did. Like, came out of nowhere, and it's like I knew it was coming. I had this inner giggle because I was, doing my sage thing on the rocks, singing my song
Yeah. Yeah.
to the woods, and then I called in hummingbird, and bam, right in front of my third eye.
Yeah.
Is hovering right in front of me is this hummingbird, and that's never happened. And of course I couldn't make it happen again because that's my ego trying to control things.
Yeah.
But that was the coolest thing. I feel like that's the magic that I think is missing in Western psychology. That's
Well,
the
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
that's I think what I get from this path, Jose.
And he told us, before he passed on, he told us that he was going to work with our students, whoever they were, in the future. He was going to work with our students, and that was the way he was going to show up. And that he would always be there as a partner with us, helping us out. And of course, we didn't know exactly what that meant at the time, but then it became very obvious when, like, he would show up like he did for you, that he was keeping his promise, and that, he was consistent and regular, and really, really supporting us in our work and our development on the shamanic path. He's always here. He's here right now. So,
Yeah, I felt him when he started talking
yeah.
about him. So I feel him a lot though, because I call on Guadalupe and I ask for support.
Yeah.
And this is something also I feel like I only learned when I started the shamanic path, is that there is support, because in my first healing, I felt a similar thing to you felt. I felt better. I felt like a loving presence, and I'd never really felt that before in my life.
Yeah.
Felt a loving presence coming over me, and it was like, wow, there's something here that loves me. And I can't see it, but I can feel it. And I think that's a big shift for people to get out of this, the brain. Like the mind is so tricky. And I know you do a lot of work around that. I mean, I've got your well-worn copy of Transforming Your Dragons because we read this book often in my household, um, to really get a hold of all the different ways the ego plays in the mind. This is really the benefit I feel of the shamanic path.
Yeah. Well, uh, shamanism is the world's oldest spiritual tradition. Now, some people have tried to say that shamanism is a religion, but it really doesn't fit the bill of a religion to me. There's no dogma, there's no pope, there's no book, there's no, it's been practiced all over the world in every continent, even though shamans have had no contact with each other, physical contact, that is. It's remarkably similar around the world, except for differences of cultural dress and things like that. I've met in my travels, I've met shamans that were also Catholic, shamans that were Buddhist, mostly Tibetan Buddhist. I've met shamans that were Hindu. I even met a Jewish shaman, practicing Judaism. So it seems to be adjunctive to religion, not a religion of its own. It's basically what it is a spiritual path. And, but it's more than the usual spiritual path, because it includes such things as healing, and it includes art, and it includes storytelling. And so it's more comprehensive than a religion. It's really more a way of life. It's a path, and it greatly enhances whatever else you do. So it's been said, and I agree with this totally, and I see it myself, is that being the world's oldest spiritual path, it came up against many obstacles. So when the traditional organized religions came along, they tried to wipe out shamanism because they regarded it as competitive. And then even political systems did, like Hitler tried to, he basically sent every shaman he could find to the camps to destroy them, because they were in competition with the Nazi ideal and all that kind of thing. So shamanism has survived despite many attempts to wipe it out. That's how powerful it is. And in my understanding, it seems that the shamanic way, which is nature-based, is in our DNA. It's shown up all over the whole world. It shows up wherever people are. Well, that's interesting. I think there's a genetic component to it, and it keeps popping up, and you can't get rid of it. What are we going to do? So what happened was that science came along several hundred years ago. Science really became a strong force, and they had to get rid of the influence of organized religions, because that was in the way of scientific progress. And so unfortunately, they also were trying to push away shamanism as being superstitious and just, psychotic. It was just crazy people, because they didn't understand. But now that we have quantum physics as part of our scientific discovery and world, we're finding that the discoveries of quantum physicists align perfectly with the kinds of things that shamans have been talking about for thousands of years. And so now it appears to be that the future that awaits us, the future is going to be a marriage between the highest forms of science and the ancient traditions of shamanism. So it's only by uniting them, bringing them together, will we get a complete understanding and picture of who we are as human beings and what life is like on this planet and where we're going. And in other words, our ability to unveil the mysteries of life, which science has been really good at, but they've had a very, very important part missing, and that was the mystical. They were so scared of the contamination of religion that they just divorced themselves from all mysticism. But that's been a serious error, because they were blocked from going very far. They could only go so far, in other words, what I'm saying. And it's only with the opening and association with the ancient mysteries and the shamanic perspective that they can really now go farther than they've ever been. And it's so exciting because it's happening as we speak. And it's quite clear that shamanism is making a huge comeback based on how many books are available on shamanism now as opposed to like 10 years ago. There was hardly anything 10 years ago. And now there's just hundreds of books on shamanism, and there's tremendous interest in it around the world. Articles being written about it, etc. Okay, so that shows that it's definitely not dead and that it's making a huge comeback, and it's being referenced by some of the quantum physicists. So that's tremendously exciting, and it means that we're headed for a really bright future, even though we've got a few small problems to solve.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's also the fulfillment of the prophecy of the eagle and the condor.
Yeah.
Because the eagle being our mind, right, in Western forward motion in the technology and the thinking and the expansion in that capacity, and the condor, the heart, the path of love, and how to put those two in the right relationship. I'm sure you have things to say about that.
Well, actually, that says it in a nutshell, what you just said. That's been a archetypal prophecy among the peoples of the Andes that practice their form of shamanism, the Q'ero people, the Andean tribes. They still practice a form of Incan shamanism, which has been around for a long, long time. And that's been one of their prophecies, that there would come a day when the eagle of the north and the condor of South America would fly together. And that is clearly beginning to happen. It's a beautiful image, right? I love that image of these two enormous birds, one from North America, one from South America. They do have eagles in South America, though. They're called river eagles, and but their bird is the condor. Represents the South America, and of course the eagle represents North America. And the image of them coming together and flying together is a beautiful and powerful image, and it's exactly what you said. It's the marriage of the right brain with the left brain, the marriage of the heart and the intellect, which is all what needs to happen. We've been imbalanced. It's either too much of one or too much of the other, but what we need is them working together in a great harmony. And that's what is coming. And I think that's so inspiring. It gives me it brings a smile to my face. It brings me a lot of hope, actually. Hope is a kind of wimpy term, though. It's really more of a sense of knowing that things are going to be really all right in the long run.
Yeah, and there is a gradual awakening as at least in my experience as I've gone the path of the heart, because I've been working with the Indian, the South American cultures and shamanism. That's been the path of opening my heart. And the more that my heart opens, the more I actually listen in a whole new way. I've been able to realize that, for example, the rocks in my mesa, you know, the medicine stones have wisdom beyond what I thought, or the plants that we work with, and you know, if we work in the jungle, that the medicine there, that those are actually plants from probably around the galaxy that have like a lot of wisdom. So it's a different mindset than my Western upbringing, thinking that humans are at the top of the food chain and we know everything. There's a whole nother wisdom in shamanism that says something really different than that.
Yeah, you know, I like that, the territory of medicine, you know, that shamanism talks about the idea that anything can be a medicine. Like the sun is a medicine, the moon is a medicine. Well, you know, to a traditional Western scientist, that sounds like it's crazy. But you know, when you look a little closer, we do know that people need to be out in the sun. They need, you know, vitamin D and, and other benefits, you know. It's a medicine, it's a vitamin. And um, everything is like that. The animals are medicines, the plants are medicines, the minerals are medicines. We know that our bodies need minerals. And we actually put minerals into our bodies and sometimes we're don't have enough of something, and then we have some kind of, you know, side effects. So all these things really are medicines. And we also know that when you give somebody too much of something, maybe it's not a medicine anymore, maybe it's a poison. And in shamanism, it's the same thing. You know, it's like, yes, you need the sun, but if you're out in the sun too much, you get burned. So it's a medicine, but it also is a poison if it's in the wrong dosage. And so really they're not so far apart, these notions of, you know, of what we need from the plant kingdom and the mineral kingdom and the animal kingdom, is that they can be harmful if you use them in the wrong way. One of the greatest examples of that is the use of tobacco.
Oh yeah.
Shamanic tradition around the planet has that tobacco is one of the most powerful allies that a shaman can work with. But we also know that the tobacco use, it kills so many people through cancer and many other maladies. So what is it? Is tobacco bad for you, or is tobacco actually good? Well, it depends on how you use it. It can be a powerful, wonderful ally if you use it in the proper manner. And in shamanism, that's by being respectful toward it and honoring it as a very, very strong, helpful plant that can purify the body, or purify or protect the body. It's, you know, among Native American peoples of the North, it's a strong carrier of prayers. So they wouldn't think of having a ceremony and praying without tobacco. You know, if you're going to pray, you got to have tobacco. You know, carries your prayers. So you can't just say, well, tobacco's good or tobacco's bad. No, it's qualified with, if you understand its power and its properties, then you will use it in a way that is careful but very beneficial. And if you're careless with it and you're disrespectful with it and you use it for selfish purposes, like, you know, for your own gratification, then it's going to hurt you. And you know.
And I feel like that's the same, like a lot of people are really interested in marijuana right now, and I feel like that is the same argument. It's like, what are you using the plant for? Like CBD oil is very healing, and that's a
Yep.
proper use. That is a proper use of the plant. You use it that way, you're gonna have miraculous healing. But if you use it to sort of tune out or distort or take a, take a trip or I don't know. That's just my opinion, but I feel like it's not going to serve you as well.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's very similar. It's a bit of a problem because, when anything, and like tobacco did, when anything gets tied too much to, um, economics,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it becomes a commodity, which is like makes money, then it's very easy to start misusing it because you try to market it and you try to push it on people. And of course, the more they use it, the richer you get if you're selling it. That's happened with tobacco, and now it's happening with marijuana, and that's unfortunate. And that is like a problem that we're going to have to come to terms with at some point here, because no, this is a sacred medicine, and if you use it, willy nilly, and people are making money and huge profits off it willy nilly, then it's going to be a poison.
I on that topic, this is a subject of debate in the healing community for sure, about spiritual healings and about sacred ceremonies. And there's this blending with the Western psychology, where in the Western psychology, I've noticed that if people don't have an investment in something, they don't honor the medicine of it.
That's right.
But in indigenous thinking, a lot of times spiritual healing is something that is sacred, that isn't exchanged for money.
Yeah.
So we have this eagle condor moment right now of blending the two worlds, because in order for Western people to receive the medicine, their minds need to pay a lot for it somehow, for some reason. They can't seem to get across that bridge sometimes. What are your thoughts about that? Because I know it's a huge debate in the shamanic communities that I'm part of.
As usual, these debates and arguments come from people not seeing the big picture. So whenever you take sides, then you have conflict, and it goes on forever. There's no resolution to it. It's just an argument that goes on and on and on. So that's not helpful. So really, what you have is I'm a pragmatist, so I tend to look at what exists? What do we have? It's not helpful to be too idealistic here. Okay, so there are those that say, well, in a perfect world, no one should pay for shamanic healing, or nobody should pay for a ceremony, or and I agree wholeheartedly with that principle, but in reality, that's not the way we live today. All throughout history, shamans have had to eat. They had to
Yeah,
clothe
they have
themselves.
biological needs.
They needed shelter, and so their payment in those days for services rendered was that people would give them a goat, or people would give them some tree bark, or it was a form of payment, but it didn't look like payment. Like, there was no money changing hands. But did they receive some payment? Absolutely. Would they refuse treatment for a person that couldn't pay? No. So you see, so it's not either or, it's both and. And in today's world, we need to eat. We've got bills to pay. We've got taxes to pay. We've got transportation to pay for, because we live in a capitalistic society that demands that. That's just the way it is. And if you don't earn money, you end up in deep trouble.
It's
You
true.
end up homeless is what you do. And then you can't be much good to anybody. So today we live in a world where, it's not that somebody is really paying for a healing that they're getting from you. They're really paying for your time. We're selling our time because that's the way our culture thinks about it. Or they're paying for you to have the wherewithal to be able to do what you do. Because if you didn't do that, you'd have to be like doing some other job that might not be at all helpful. So, you know, you have to look at these things without a lot of judgment in terms of being judgmental, and be practical about it and say, yeah, so we need to find a way to accommodate both. And you know, I think that some people really try to do that and they manage to carry it off really well. And I've seen people charge exorbitant prices, you know, like $1,000 an hour for doing things that really are shouldn't be charged for like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're just taking advantage and making a killing on something that, no, that's not right. So basically what I follow as a policy is I try to charge something that helps me to provide for myself and my family, but isn't going to break somebody's bank at all. It's like moderate. And it seems to be acceptable to most people. And that works for me too. And yeah, maybe the day will come when the whole economy changes and we're not doing that anymore. But right now, that's what we're doing. And, you know, you got to make it work somehow.
Yeah, and it is definitely, because I've heard the argument of, oh, well, because I've had this conversation, obviously, because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and people have said, well, Carrie, you could, you know, you could do a different job and then the healings could be free. And I was like, well, that doesn't work for me actually, because I need to immerse. Like, I'm very aware that to be a really effective healer, it requires immersion because there's a lot to know and there's a lot to receive and absorb.
Yeah.
And my ego needs a lot of maintenance, you know. So like, in order to get it to cooperate and to do a really good healing, I've got to keep training, you know, keep working on myself. This is an immersion.
Yeah, that's right. You know, it's like I've heard that argument, and it, you know, I get the point, but in reality, it doesn't work so well that way, because you end up spending a good part of your vitality and energy on some job that exhausts you, you know, like working in a corporate setting or something. And then really there's not a lot left of you to come home and then heal people. You know, at that point, you're the one that needs the healing.
Yeah, because you've been in corporate all day healing them
Yeah.
with your energy. Yeah, so I think it's possible for people. Some people say, oh, well, you're just special and you just know how to do that. I don't think that's true. I actually think it's a matter of intention. I know there's life plans and things like that. And I definitely feel like this is part of my life plan. But I do believe that people can learn how to open to greater information by studying shamanism and practicing shamanism. I think it's possible for everybody. I think it's the universal connection point.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that that's true. Okay. That there's so much that people could learn. People use a tiny fraction of their skills and their abilities and their talents. And a lot of that's because they're ignorant of what's available, what they could know. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And so yes, people could really step into a lot greater knowledge and become a little more empowered in helping one another if they just need a little bit of information. And so yes, we need to educate more people. That's all. Education really unlocks a lot of doors. And it's true that some people have more talent than other people. Like, what if you said, well, it's only the people with the great talent that should play music. Everybody else should shut up and not. Well, no, that would be dumb. It's like everybody should play music at some level, even if all they did was ring a little bell. If that's what they can do, great, ring the bell. But no, we shouldn't leave it all up to the virtuosos. Sure, we like them. hey, for sure, play. But why can't everybody else play at another level for enjoyment and for self-expression? And, it's the same thing.
Absolutely. And it's the path that opens up for you as you practice it. Like, I really like that you opened by saying that this was a path, that this is a way of life. And I find that as I dedicate myself to it, more doors open for me. It's sort of like you said with your mentor, it was kind of testing you to see, are you gonna do it or not? And I feel like this path, the forces assisting us on the other side are thinking the same way. Are you gonna show up? Are you gonna keep doing it? Even though I'm not, you don't feel it or you're not having a big moment, are you gonna keep doing it?
Right. That's, this is another topic, but it has to do with your rules for a living, and if you have a rule internally that says, well, I can only be effective when I'm feeling great, that's very limiting. So the other possibilities, you could have a different rule and you could say, no matter how I'm feeling today, no matter whether I'm up or down or sideways, whenever I do this work, I'm very effective at it. And I get all the help that I need regardless of how I'm feeling. Well, that opens a lot more doors, and unfortunately, we tend to be very black and white about the way we think, very concrete. And so, no, I have to be feeling great in order to be a good healer. That is not true. It's just not. I've had plenty of days when I've been kind of struggling with things, and yet my sessions were fabulous. And was because I was asking for help. And I asked for help. I got the help. And my sessions were great. And yeah, it was kind of a hard day for me.
But you kept showing up.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have very many days that I could be working because I'm not always in top form every day,
Yeah, there's some days you're in the flow and some days you're a little in the netty.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
you're in the,
okay.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that might be exactly part of the healing for that day. I've learned too, that could be the thing that's up that day. And, I'll be having something going on in my life and then I'll have a client session already set up. And then what do they start talking about? Something extremely similar. So,
Yeah, that's
okay.
usually the case.
Glad I didn't cancel that session because I feel like it heals us too. So what's a good pathway for people to get started with, exploring shamanism? Because especially if people are super like left-brained and they've been in the psychotherapy model or that kind of way of thinking about things, what's an easy first step to just kind of start exploring this other way?
Well, it used to be that shamans were all over the place and every tribe had at least one, if not several. And so you could learn, right from the get-go. But that's not true these days. Shamans, bona fide, trained, and initiated shamans are fewer and farther between. Okay, so there have to be other ways to learn shamanism. So you can start just with simple reading. I mean, that's not the traditional way of learning shamanism. It's an oral tradition, and there never really were books, manuals, things like
Yeah,
that.
here's how
Train
you do
people to
it.
be shamans. It wasn't like that, But today there are a lot of very, very good books that talk about shamanism and kind of describe what it's all about and give some very good exercises and processes for beginning to open up, which you can do on your own. It's now possible to do that. But eventually, you're going to want to work with somebody that is like a real human being that, can give you some pointers and all of that. And so there's a lot online that you can, training programs and all kinds of stuff. Now, granted, like anything else, some of them are great and some of those people are sort of hacks. They're just in it to make a few bucks. So you have to be discerning, just like you're discerning about a counselor or about getting a lawyer. You know, you're discerning about it. You try to get a referral or, you know, look into it a little bit, do a little research, read a little something they've written, find out where their heart is. You know, if they got an open heart, if you feel connected, you feel like, wow, I could learn from this person, you're on the right track. So it's not so hard anymore. It's become much easier with the world of telecommunications and all that. And there are even some webinars online and lots of YouTubes. And there's all kinds of stuff. It's never been easier to get started. And I would really recommend that people follow their curiosity and follow their heart in it. You know, it has to feel right. It has to feel good. And then at some point attend a workshop or something that somebody is giving that, you know, could take you further. And if you like them, then you can begin to study with them or something like that. Okay. So do they have to be wearing special clothes like feathers and no, that's sort of the old-fashioned way. You know, a person doesn't have to wear a costume to be a good shaman. In fact, some of the best shamans around are plain clothes. They're like plain clothes, you know, you've heard of maybe plain clothes nuns. They don't wear habits anymore. They pass. It's the same thing with shamans. They're wearing blue jeans and some old cowboy boots and, you know, an old checkered shirt or dress. And at first you might just walk by them and think they were just like some homeless person.
I was going to say a level of humility, I think is that, you know,
Yeah,
humility is definitely not self-deprecation, but humility is definitely part of, and a lot of people I would classify as shamans don't call themselves that either. And, you know,
that's
they
right.
sort of uncomfortable with that term.
Most indigenous people that practice shamanism do not call themselves shamans. They say, "Oh no, 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 I'm a healer," or they use some other term that their tribe uses. You know, shamanism is a word that came out of Siberia, and you know there were bona fide shamans that came out of Siberia. I mean, it's a great, powerful tradition, but it's not exactly appropriate to call people in South America shamans or people in, you know, the British Isles shamans. That's a Evenki word from Siberia. But these days, that's the popular term. So we have to be pragmatic about it and use it. But no, they may not call themselves a shaman at all.
So one word of encouragement for people to start the path, Jose, because you've had a pretty amazing life. I mean, I just know because of just my bird's eye view, just and sharing experiences with you and your family. It's amazing the path when you can actually walk it. Just a word of encouragement, you know, what could people expect to find, you know?
Well, I'm going to say two things that are the opposite. Okay.
Okay.
The first
It's
thing
actually
is,
tough.
uh, you know, it's a little bit like you're staggering along in your life, and it's kind of hit or miss, more miss than hit, you know. And then let's say that you discover like Wizard of Oz, you discover the golden path, the yellow brick road, which is the golden path, right? And now you're on this path and it feels good and things are starting to unfold and there's synchronicities happening and you just happen to be in the right place at the right time. And you're starting to look at your life as something's happened to my life. It's like kind of magical and better. It's not that you don't have any problems anymore, but things just flow better. And you could say, I'm on the golden line of my life. That's what the shamanic path is all about, being on the golden line of your life. So that being off the path happens less and less and less, and being on the path happens more and more and more. And you look around, you go, you know what? I'm not afraid anymore. you know what, I'm not depressed anymore. You know what, I'm happy about my life and it's going well, even though some days it's hard. So that's that. I can say that on the one side. But now I'm going to say something that Guadalupe told me a long time ago, and I discovered is absolutely true. He said, if you don't intend to have integrity, don't start this path.
Oh, yeah. Woo!
Don't
That is
start
so
this
accurate.
path, because if you start this path and then you go off the path and you do things without integrity and without any principles, and you start to take advantage of people or use your skills for harm or anything like that, he said the consequences for that are way worse than if you ever never started. And I listened to that with horror, you know. I mean, it scared me.
It's so true, though. It's really true. And
It's so
that's why
true.
people have a hard time starting programs. Like, I notice that people have a hard time starting programs with me. They have all this fear about it. And I know
Yeah,
it's because they know once you know better, you got to do better. And you're committing to that when you start this path.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, then, I mean, at first it scared me, but then I realized, hey, you know, I I shouldn't worry because, you know, my integrity is pretty good, and I don't intend to go off and harm people and live a life without integrity. So I don't really need to worry too much about that. And it's true,
It's true.
you know. But there's some people out there who I've watched take a hard right or a hard left, and all of a sudden they're functioning without integrity. Maybe they're using their shamanic skills to get laid. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on out there. You have to look out for that. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, and you will be held accountable for it. And the longer you're on the path, the more steep the consequences for getting off the path.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it is, you know, it's a lifelong journey. And I think it's a soul journey. And once you're on it, you're really on it. There's no like
Yeah.
detours, you know.
Yeah. But it's so worth it.
It's totally, it's magical. It's like where all the good stuff is. So, well, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Jose. Wow, what a powerful interview. Thank you for everything that you shared. Really grateful for you coming on. And I think this is a really powerful discussion for people that are, you know, on the fence about shamanism, or whatever they're doing right now isn't working and they want something that works. And so thank you for contributing your wisdom. And I hope that everybody out there could really feel the energy of this conversation and just know that, you know, as you're listening to Jose, something to watch back as you watch it back is to tune into his heart when he's speaking, because you can actually, when you speak from heart and you can feel that it's palpable. So um, just notice that. Thank
Well,
you so much.
thank you for the opportunity to share. And this is a powerful and valuable service that you're performing because you're getting the word out. So that's great.
As the sage that I am, right, Jose?
Yeah.
Jose made it okay for me to be a sage, you know, because I was always the one that had so much to say, and I had to claim the stage, and I had to be the spotlight, and people in my life kind of tried to make that a problem for me, that was some ego thing. And Jose just gave me this avenue where it's like, no, this is just what you're here for. And then I was able to settle into it and do my function. So thank you for that, Jose.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. Okay, well, everybody, so definitely check out the PowerPath's website. I'm going to give you guys a link to check out their programs, because they actually have online teachings for shamanism, so that are already recorded, and they're wonderful. So I'm going to give you guys a link to that. You guys can check that out. And to Jose's books, you'll get to see some of his books. I really recommend this one, Transforming Your Dragons. Once again, once you pick this book up, there's no going back. You will be aware. And it might drive you a little batty for a while, but it's really good stuff. You might squirm in your seat just a little bit. So I recommend you read that, and just check out his work. It's really powerful stuff. So thank you for tuning in. If you like this episode, please share it out. Please like, subscribe to help other people find this information. We know there's a lot of people looking for this information right now, and you could be a conduit to serve in that capacity too and help the awakening of the planet. So thank you for doing your part. And I like to give people kisses on the way out. Jose, you can join me if you like or not. It's up to you, but I always give kisses. So here they come, everybody. Mwah. Whew. Love you guys. We'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye.
Bye-bye.